the hidden clock of economic collapse. Before we continue exploring the mechanics of economic cycles and the long-term consequences of our debt-based fiat system, allow me a brief moment to mention this. If any part of today's discussion strikes a chord, whether it's a particular historical example that clarifies the pattern or a clearer understanding of how these pressures affect future generations, please consider showing your support by liking the episode, sharing it with others who might find value in it, and following for upcoming episodes. Your engagement truly helps sustain this kind of in-depth, unfiltered examination of the forces shaping our economic reality. We're going to spend some time unpacking economic cycles and what happens when societies lean so heavily on fiat currency and endless debt. It's a topic that affects every part of our lives, from the prices we pay at the store to the opportunities our kids and grandkids might have down the road. No hype, just a straightforward look at how these systems work, why they repeat in certain ways, and what that means long-term. You've probably noticed how economies seem to boom and then stumble every couple of decades. One year everything feels prosperous, jobs are plentiful, markets climb, and then suddenly things tighten up, prices spike or jobs vanish, and it feels like starting over. People often blame greed or bad luck or some policy slip-up. But if you step back and look across the last couple of centuries, a clearer picture emerges. These ups and downs aren't purely accidental. They follow pressures that build up inside the monetary system itself, pressures tied directly to how money gets created and how debt compounds over time. Let's start at the foundation. In modern economies, most of the currency in circulation isn't printed out of thin air by governments handing out cash. It enters the system through debt. When a government needs to spend more than it collects in taxes, it issues bonds, basically promises to repay with interest later. Central banks buy those bonds by creating new currency in their ledgers. Commercial banks do something similar when they extend loans. Every dollar, euro, or yen you hold traces back to some loan or bond somewhere. That's not a side effect. It's the core design. Money equals debt given form, and that debt comes with interest that grows over time. The problem shows up because the interest on all that debt compounds faster than the underlying economy can always expand to cover it. To keep things afloat, more debt gets issued to service the old debt. New currency gets created to pay yesterday's obligations. As long as growth keeps pace and people trust the system, it rolls along. But trust is fragile. When confidence dips, the whole setup reveals its limits. You end up with more claims on future production than future production can realistically support. Right now, the numbers tell a stark story. Total global debt, including government, corporate, household, and financial, sits near $346 trillion as of late last year, with more added every quarter. That's not just government borrowing. Sovereign debt alone runs over $100 trillion, but when you layer in everything else, the scale becomes enormous. In the United States, the national debt has climbed past $38 trillion, and the annual interest payments on it are pushing toward or already exceeding $1 trillion a year in recent projections. That's more than the defense budget in many years and on track to crowd out a lot of other spending. Japan's debt-to-GDP ratio hovers around 230% or higher in recent figures, a level that's been managed so far through domestic ownership and low rates, but it shows the strain these systems face everywhere. This isn't sustainable forever in a mathematical sense. The obligation grows exponentially while real productive capacity grows more linearly. At some point, the arithmetic catches up. Governments and central banks then face tough choices. They can default outright, which tanks credibility fast. Or they can use inflation, currency devaluation, or some kind of reset to ease the burden on the borrowers, which are usually the governments and big institutions themselves. History shows they almost always pick the second path because it preserves appearances and shifts the cost elsewhere. Look back at some clear examples without getting lost in the weeds. After the pressures of World War I, Britain suspended gold convertibility and inflated its way through obligations rather than repaying in full value. In the Weimar period, impossible reparations led to printing money until the currency collapsed, wiping out the savings of the middle class while those holding hard assets or foreign currency bought up real wealth cheaply. In the United States in 1933, gold holdings were confiscated from citizens and the dollar was revalued against gold, effectively devaluing it by about 40%. That made existing debts easier to repay in nominal terms but cut the purchasing power of savings. Then came 1971, when convertibility to gold ended entirely, turning the dollar into pure fiat and allowing debt to expand without that external check. Each time, the crisis was framed as temporary or external, war or emergency, but the outcome was the same. Existing claims got diluted, and a new arrangement took hold. More recently, 2008 saw massive interventions where private debts got socialized through central bank actions and trillions in new currency creation to prevent systemic collapse. Asset prices recovered for those holding stocks and real estate, but many ordinary homeowners faced foreclosures. In 2020, stimulus and balance sheet expansions pushed the Federal Reserve's holdings from around $4 trillion to nearly $9 trillion in short order. Again, the new money flowed heavily into financial assets rather than broad wage gains or productive capacity. The result was higher nominal wealth for asset owners alongside eroded purchasing power for wages, pensions, and savings. Anyone buying groceries, fuel, or housing in the years after felt the real impact, even if official inflation numbers understated it for some. These events highlight the recurring pattern. Roughly every 40 to 50 years, the buildup reaches a breaking point, followed by a reset that transfers value. Debt gets issued to cover prior debt, currency supply expands, and when the math stops working, the claims of savers and fixed income holders get reduced through inflation or devaluation. Those who control issuance or hold real assets coming into the reset often come out ahead. Workers, savers, and pensioners usually bear the heavier load. The implications of relying on fiat currency go deeper than one cycle. Fiat money has no intrinsic anchor, so its value depends on confidence and policy choices. When supply increases faster than goods and services, purchasing power erodes. This acts like a hidden tax that hits everyone holding cash or fixed payments but benefits borrowers, especially large ones who can roll over obligations at suppressed rates. Over decades, it punishes planning and thrift while rewarding leverage and timing. Savers lose ground even if they do everything right. Future generations inherit not just the nominal debt but the consequences. Potentially higher taxes to service interest, reduced government services as budgets get squeezed, or ongoing inflation that makes their wages and savings by less. Think about what that means practically. Today's young people and those not yet born will face an economy where a larger slice of output goes toward interest rather than infrastructure, education, or innovation. If interest payments consume more federal revenue, choices narrow. Cut programs, raise taxes, or print more and accept higher inflation. Each path reduces real living standards over time. The system requires perpetual growth to function, but growth isn't guaranteed, especially when debt service crowds out productive investment. Environmental and resource limits add another layer, but the monetary design itself pushes for endless expansion that can't always match reality. The pattern repeats because the core elements stay in place. Debt-based creation, compound interest, central control over supply, and the incentive for borrowers in power to choose implicit easing over explicit default. Crises get presented as one-offs, but the structure guarantees tension builds again. Each reset sets up the next cycle on a larger scale, with more total claims and thinner margins for error. Here are a few passages that capture this dynamic clearly. One notes, every major financial collapse of the last 2 centuries followed the same structural pattern, the same pressures, the same impossible obligations, the same carefully timed destruction. Another puts it this way, debt carries interest. Interest compounds. The obligation grows faster than the currency used to service it. In a closed system, this is sustainable only as long as new debt is issued to cover old debt. And on inflation. Inflation is a tax that requires no legislation, cannot be voted against, cannot be repealed. It extracts value silently, invisibly, continuously, punishes those who save. It rewards those who borrow. It transfers wealth from those who work to those who own. These lines cut to the heart of why the system behaves this way. The design isn't neutral. It favors expansion and dilution over stability and preservation of value. So what can anyone do with this understanding? Awareness is the starting point. Recognize that fiat and high debt levels carry built-in risks of erosion and resets. Focus on building real, productive assets. Skills that stay valuable, businesses or investments tied to tangible output, commodities, or property that holds utility beyond paper claims. Reduce exposure to high fixed nominal debt where possible, especially if rates rise. Diversify beyond pure currency holdings. Support policies that encourage genuine growth and fiscal discipline rather than endless borrowing. For younger people especially, prioritize adaptability and multiple income streams because the burden of past obligations may limit traditional paths like stable pensions or predictable wage growth. None of this guarantees immunity, but preparation beats surprise. The cycles have played out before, and the current trajectory suggests another chapter is approaching. The ledger keeps running. Timing remains uncertain, but the pressures are measurable. That's my take for today. Appreciate you listening through it all. Reflect on how these mechanics touch your own situation and the world we're handing forward. Take care. Stay free.